Welcome to the 700 Club. First, we go to Israel, where the message is, stay strong, survive. That's the message the parents of an American hostage are sending their son after Hamas released a video showing him alive.
As his parents plead for the release of all the hostages held by Hamas, anti-Israel protests continue to spread on U.S. college campuses. CBN's Chris Mitchell reports.
Protesters clashing with police at the University of Texas as officers move in, arresting dozens. At USC, nearly 100 demonstrators were taken into custody. As the protests spread to more college campuses across America, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu railed against the anti-Semitic and anti-American rioters.
Anti-Semitic mobs have taken over leading universities. They call for the annihilation of Israel. They attack Jewish students. They attack Jewish faculty. When you listen to them, it's also because they say not only death to Israel, death to the Jews, but death to America. And this tells us that there's an anti-Semitic surge here that has terrible consequences.
Netanyahu added a warning about this exponential rise in anti-Semitism.
We have to stop anti-Semitism because anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine. It always precedes larger conflagrations that engulf the entire world.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and several colleagues came to witness the upheaval at Columbia. He called on Columbia's president to resign if she can't get the campus under control immediately.
As Speaker of the House, I am committing today that the Congress will not be silent as Jewish students are expected to run for their lives and stay home from their classes hiding in fear.
Johnson also threatened to stop federal funds to universities that don't create a safe environment for Jewish students. Dr. Michael Widlansky, an alumnus of Columbia and Middle East analyst, told CBN News his former campus reminds him of Germany in the 1930s.
It's Nazi Germany. It starts with delegitimizing somebody, trying to browbeat them into the ground, to scare them to staying in their holes, their huddles, their caves, so that they won't come out. It's the time that my father went through in Europe. His whole family was wiped out by Nazis. We know what Nazis can do. We know what this can lead to.
The protesters call Israel an apartheid state and accuse the government of committing genocide in Gaza for its war on Hamas, after the terror group killed 1,200 Israelis on October 7th and still hold more than 100 hostages. Wednesday, Hamas released a propaganda video showing one of those still in captivity, American Hirsch Goldberg, Poland. In a video, his parents expressing relief to see their son alive and encouraging him to endure.
Hirsch, if you can hear this, we heard your voice today for the first time in 201 days. And if you can hear us, I am telling you, we are telling you, we love you, stay strong, survive.
Meanwhile, the UN is calling for an investigation into accusations of mass graves around Gaza hospitals that saw intense fighting recently. Israel released a statement that the claims are baseless. Hamas has also proposed a 5-year ceasefire if a two-state solution is implemented. But Israel steadfastly rejects the idea of a Palestinian state. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, I've said it before, and I just think I need to say it again. When you accuse Israel of being an apartheid state, of trying to commit genocide in Gaza, you have turned the truth onto its head. The only country in the Middle East where Christians are growing is Israel. The population of Christians in Israel is growing. The only place where it's safe to be Druze. You can be Muslim and walk the streets of Tel Aviv in perfect safety. Now, contrast that with Gaza before October 7th. If you were Jewish, you would be killed. If you're Jewish and you go to Ramallah, there's signs right outside the city that the IDF says, don't go here because we can't guarantee your safety. Go back to 1948 when Israel declared its independence. Suddenly, it became illegal to be Jewish and be in the Middle East. In Iraq, it was a capital crime to be Jewish. If you were discovered, you would be hung. What kind of apartheid state is that? You're not even allowed to exist. Now, the genocide is solely on the part of the Palestinians. When you hear the slogan, from the river to the sea, what that means is Israel needs to be wiped off the map and every Jew killed. That's genocide. What is happening in Gaza today is entirely because of Hamas. They attacked Israel. Israel is defending itself. If you care for the citizens of Gaza, if you care for the innocent children there, the entire pressure should be put on Hamas. Will you release all the hostages? Will you unconditionally surrender and lay down your arms? Will you allow peace to govern Gaza instead of this radical Muslim ideology that calls for the extermination of Jews? That's the reality, that's the truth, and that's what should be protested. And here in America, have we forgotten? There are American hostages in these tunnels. Let us please bring our people home. Everything should be dedicated to that. Instead, we have the UN launching useless investigations accusing Israel of war crimes. Well, where's the investigation of Hamas? Where's the investigation of UNRWA, the UN relief agency that has been funding instruction in terrorism, had terrorists on their payroll? Where's that investigation? Where's the investigation of our own State Department that was reinstated funding for UNRWA? Do we not understand that that funding went into rockets and went into weapons so that Hamas could attack Israel? Let's put the truth back in place and stop this nonsense, because it is absolute nonsense. Well, later in the show, we're going to be speaking to a survivor of the October 7th attack. You'll have eyewitness testimony of what happened on that day. Well, in other news, right here in America, the Supreme Court will soon decide whether to strike down Idaho's near-total abortion ban. The justices heard arguments yesterday. Pro-life advocates say the case is an attempt by the Biden administration to reinstate a nationwide abortion mandate. Lori Johnson reports.
Pro-choice, that's a lie! Babies never choose to die!
Demonstrators on both sides of the abortion divide made their voices heard at the U.S. Supreme Court.
I don't want legislators telling me what I can do with my body.
Abortion is murder!
CBN's Tara Mergener was outside the High Court as it heard the second abortion case in the past month.
The outcome of this Idaho case will have nationwide implications, particularly in other places like Texas, that will only allow an abortion if the mother will likely die otherwise.
The Idaho law allows doctors to perform abortions only to save the mother's life. The Biden administration argues that violates a federal law known as EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, which requires hospitals to stabilize ER patients who can't pay. Idaho denies the charge.
Idaho's law and EMTALA are consistent. They both seek to protect the lives of women and their unborn children.
Conservative justices pointed out EMTALA doesn't specifically mention abortion, but does identify an unborn child as a patient.
So in that situation, the hospital must stabilize the threat to the unborn child. And it seems that the plain meaning is that the hospital must try to eliminate any immediate threat to the child. But performing an abortion is antithetical to that duty.
The Biden administration says EMTALA requires doctors to perform abortions in cases where a woman's health is threatened, not just her life.
For example, a lot of times a pregnant woman in distress, she might start suffering liver damage or kidney malfunction.
Attorney Josh Turner, representing the state, suggested that could be interpreted to include mental health. He accused the Biden administration of trying to use the federal law to reinstate a nationwide abortion mandate.
There are 22 states with abortion laws on the books. This isn't going to end with Idaho, because all of the states that have abortion regulations define the health and the emergency exception narrower than EMTALA does. And so this question is going to come up in state after state after state.
On the issue of conscience, the Biden administration said EMTALA does not require doctors who oppose abortion to perform them against their will. The court will issue its decision on this case in June. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Just from a legal theory standpoint, we were looking to the courts to legislate for us because we can't figure it out. And I think that's an absolute mistake. It's been something where the Supreme Court has literally taken power from the people. And they've done it apparently with our willing cooperation. Democracy is messy. Passing legislation is messy. You have to have full debate. You have to have people participate in all of that. And we want unelected judges to decide these things for us. We need to stop that. It is antithetical to the Constitution, which begins with these words, we the people. We have to take responsibility for our culture, for our society, for our future, for the future of our children and our grandchildren. That is on us. We can't delegate that away to unelected judges. That's the fundamental problem with Roe. That's a fundamental problem with the concept, is it constitutional or unconstitutional? And if you view the Constitution as some kind of, quote, living document that you get to make it up as you go along and determine, well, it's not in the four corners of the document, but it ought to be, or we think it should be, or this is what Europe is doing and we ought to do it too. No, that's not the proper function of judiciary. It needs to be very conservative in its interpretation of constitutional rights. If it's not spelled out, what is spelled out in the Constitution, these things are left to the states, and that's where it belongs. Well, American-born Adele Raemer spent most of her life on Kibbutz Nerim in southern Israel. She called it 95% heaven. And then on October 7th, the life she knew came to an end when Hamas terrorists attacked her community.
Just weeks before October 7th, Adele Raemer enjoyed a relatively peaceful life in her beloved Kibbutz Nerim, a small village bordered by the Gaza Strip. With its well-kept homes, community garden, and lush agriculture, the kibbutz provided a beautiful communal life for some 400 residents. Born in the U.S., Raemer arrived in Israel in 1973. In 1975, she began teaching at Nerim. She would continue her classroom career for almost 40 years there, while raising her children and then enjoying her grandchildren. Little did she know how close she would come to losing them. Given its location on the Gaza border, the kibbutz almost expects sporadic rocket fire. Then, the terrorists infiltrated kibbutz. Came the surprise morning attack on October 7th, when Hamas killed, injured, or abducted about 100 of the kibbutz's residents. Raemer shows in this video how she and her family hid in their home's safe rooms and miraculously survived.
Well, Adele Raemer is here with me now, and thanks so much for being with us. I just so appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me.
Take us back to that day. It must be very hard to remember it, but what was it like on October 7th?
So October 7th for me actually started on October 6th. And before I went to bed, I told my son, if you don't see me in the morning, don't worry. I'm an amateur photographer, so I'm going out to take a picture of wildflowers before sunrise. Luckily, I did not do that, because I would not be sitting here talking to you today. 6:30 in the morning on October 7th, we started getting massive incoming rockets. And we could tell right at the beginning that this was something unusual because they were from north of Tel Aviv to south of us. As the day progressed, we ran into our safe rooms immediately, of course, closed the doors, closed the window. We were told at one point that the country had been invaded and that we should go outside, lock our doors and windows, and go back into the safe room and lock ourselves in. The problem with that is that the safe room does not lock. The safe room is built to keep us safe from rocket fire. And despite the fact that we're only a mile away from the border, it was never built for locking against infiltration. So the morning was a harrowing morning, and we did not get any official information because nobody knew what was going on. The army was caught by surprise. We didn't know anything except for the internal messaging that I could see on my phone. And I'm following, we're a small community, and I know where everybody lives, and I'm following the progression of the terrorists as they're getting closer and closer to my son-in-law's house, to my daughter's house, to our house. And just watching as virtually as houses are being burnt and people are being kidnapped, which I actually didn't know until much later. And it took 11 hours until they rescued my son and me. And that was 11 hours of mortal fear. I was sure I was not going to see another day. And I had no idea what was going on with my granddaughters, who were in another house with my son-in-law, who luckily was armed because he's one of the first responders, but didn't go out because the girls were with him on his own. And they burst into his house, and he told my grandchildren, hide yourselves under the blanket. You're going to hear a loud noise. Don't come out no matter what happens. He waited to see the door handle moving. He kicked the door open and shot the terrorist right in front of the house, in front of the safe room. So I almost lost my 3 granddaughters that day. I just want to correct something on my kibbutz. We lost 10 people. 10 people were slaughtered on Nirim, and 5 people were slaughtered on Nirim. 5 people were kidnapped. But I lost many, many friends that day. From neighboring kibbutzim, a very close friend of mine, Judy, who I have on my dog tag, was out walking in the fields for their sunrise walk with her husband, and they were murdered and their bodies kidnapped.
How did you stay safe? If your safe room wouldn't lock, how did you stay safe?
So when we heard, we sat in the safe room with the door closed, and when we heard Arabic outside and shooting just outside the window, my son, who was visiting me, thank God, sat by the door and pulled down on the handle. Because when you're pulling down on the handle, there are iron prongs that go into the frame. And so it locks for as long as you can keep it pulled down, providing that whoever's on the other side isn't strong enough to open it. At one point, we heard the terrorists outside, and we had no idea. My son said that he heard them being called away in Arabic. I looked at him, he looked at me, and told each other that we loved each other and basically said goodbye. About an hour later, when things got quieter, and I had to go to the bathroom, I opened the door very quietly and saw that the slats on my window had been broken. So they were literally starting to infiltrate my house, and dumb luck, divine intervention, or my late husband watching over us, whatever, they moved on. So we were safe for then. There was nothing we could do. I was not armed. There were people that went and got knives from the kitchen. I did not see much point in having a knife against a terrorist that's coming in with an RPG, with automatic guns.
Yeah. You're not going to be able to repel that attack.
So
I was in Kfar Aza just last month, and I saw the devastation. I didn't go to your kibbutz, Kibbutz Narim, but I saw the devastation that was left behind, and the safe rooms that became death traps, the houses that were burned to the ground, the people killed. It was absolutely horrifying to me. What's your message to America today? When you see the protests on the college campuses now, what's your message to them?
You know, the people who live where I do are people that were peace-loving and extended their hands in peace, driving Gazans who needed medical aid to hospitals These are the people that they, for some reason, felt needed to be attacked and slaughtered. When they say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that's a genocidal war cry. And I take them at their word. And America has to be very, very awake now, because the West is next. They're not going to stop with Israel. Their eyes are set on Israel and then much further on. You have to be aware of that.
Well, I'm aware of that. I'm just amazed that, you know, University of Texas, Columbia University, Yale University, these prestigious institutions where people are quite clearly quite intelligent are buying into this. I've got to call it for what I see. It's a lie.
It is a lie, but it's also, you have to understand that when you're in the Middle East, you have to talk Middle East. You can't talk West. All of those people that are protesting out there do not understand how Islamic Jihad sees the West and what they intend to do. They're the Nazis of 2024. They want to take over the Western world and bring Sharia law and take over everything that we've built in Israel and that America has built up in America.
It seems on occasion that our own government wants us to somehow buy into that it's not what it professes to be. I'm amazed that they're not calling it out. I get access to Arabic translations, and when they speak in English, they say one thing. When they speak in Arabic, they're saying something completely different. And that message isn't getting across. And it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. President Bush famously said after 9/11 that Islam means peace, and it doesn't. It means submission. And unless you submit to Sharia, they are going to attack you.
You know, I always used to say that I'm sure that the great majority of people on the other side of that fence just want the same thing that I do, to put food on their table, have safety for their children. October 7th changed that for me. I understood that I got my numbers wrong, because it wasn't only the Nukhba that came in, the armed fighters that came into my kibbutz and the communities around. It was the people on the street, men, women, children, all ages, just came in to loot and plunder and destroy. And I'm sitting there with my son holding the handle down, and I'm saying, where are the good Gazans? And I'm in touch with people from Gaza. I've been in the past in touch with people with Gaza and done educational activities with them. With people that I know, we're trying to teach the people, the children, that the people on my side of the border do not want their deaths, do want to collaborate and to communicate and to live as good neighbors. But those people are in the minority. And the Hamas has done such an excellent job at educating an entire generation to hate us.
Well, they've done it with our tax dollars. I mean, that's UNRWA. They run all the schools. So it's that we're just not awake to it. Where's their hope? I think there was some glimmer of hope when Iran sent, you know, it's kind of odd to say there's hope in the middle of a direct attack from Iran, but it seems like the Abraham Accords held. And other nations who do want peace, I think Jordan truly does want peace. They joined with Israel in defending against that attack. Saudi Arabia, to my absolute amazement, said that they went public with it and said, we join with this too. We will not allow this to happen. So is there hope? How do we get to that hope? And I guess, how do you defeat the ideology of hate?
So that Saturday was amazing. That Saturday night when those rockets came over, to see how much help we got and how ineffectual those very frightening rocket attacks were in the end. And the hope, you have to be an optimist to live in Israel. You can't not be an optimist. It doesn't work. So I'm going back home, and I'm going to rebuild, and I'm going to make it bigger and better and more beautiful and more wonderful, and that will be my revenge. That will be my way of getting back to say, terror is not going to run my life.
Well, let's talk about that effort. You're raising funds to rebuild your kibbutz. I was in Kfar Aza and talking about, are people going to come back and are they going to rebuild? And the response I got was, well, some are. Some are willing to do it again. But others are so traumatized by it that just walking inside the kibbutz and the memory of it is just too much for them. As you rebuild, who is going to come and live?
So it's really too early to say. Most people, as of today, are saying that they do want to return, but they'll have to feel safe. And you can't really compare what happened on Nirim to Kfar Aza. On Nirim, there were a number of tragedies, but there were also a number of little miracles that prevented us from being from Nir Oz, who lost 1 out of every 4, to murder, kidnapped, or Kfar Aza. Nirim had a lot less damage done, and we were pioneers in 1946 when the founders of our kibbutz went out into the desert to make it bloom. And I believe that we're going to be pioneers again, going back and rebuilding and hopefully inspiring other communities to do the same, to find the wherewithal to come back and to live and to prosper and to get our lives back, because we had so much stolen from us. I personally feel I had so much stolen from me that day. My sense of security, my sense of home, my family, who I don't know if they're going to come back. I have to go get that back.
People watching right now, if they want to help you, do you have a nonprofit here in America? How are you raising funds?
So we do have a GoFundMe site with the JNF. For Nirim, that they can go on and find that. And they're welcome to reach out to me. I'm on social media. I'm Zionist on the Border on social media, and Adele Raemer, and I'll be happy to send them the link to that GoFundMe page.
All right. Well,
Thank
we
you.
wish you well, and may the desert bloom once again, and may it bloom with peace.
It will.
Yes. All right.
With your help.
All right. Gali, Omer, and their 1-year-old daughter had to flee from their home under fire. Since then, they've been evacuated to safety. And thanks to you, they now see a light at the end of the tunnel.
There's too many, one after the other. Something doesn't sound right. Boom, boom, boom.
You don't have a quarter of a second without a bomb. It was definitely a rain of bombs.
Omer, Gali, and their 1-year-old daughter live on the Israel-Gaza border and are accustomed to occasional rocket alerts. But on the morning of October 7th, something was different.
So instinctively, we jump out of bed. Omer wakes me, we run, I grab my baby, we get into the mamad, shut the door. I was hovering over my baby because I realized it feels like one's just gonna drop on us any second.
We close everything, and when I'm closing this iron window, I can hear AK-47 rounds fired.
And he turned around and looked at me and said, "Get to the car, we're leaving." 5 minutes later, they were in the kibbutz and it was too late to leave.
More than 1,000 armed Hamas terrorists had broken through the fence and spread into communities nearby.
Like 2 or 3 persons from the Gaza Strip coming, and like never imagined something as massive as it's gonna be.
For more than 24 hours, Israelis who live close to the Gaza border were left to fend for themselves, while terrorists set homes on fire and murdered and kidnapped civilians.
In the kibbutz was definitely chaos. They came from multiple directions.
The kibbutz has a group chat, and They were saying they're at the gate, they're coming in, and people are asking, where's the army? And send help, and please, we can hear them coming in.
People barricaded themselves in their bomb shelters and waited for help.
Everybody put as much as they could in front of it. People didn't have water, they didn't have food, and they were in there for over 24 hours.
Nearby, terrorists arrived in an open field during an outdoor music festival.
People ran into the kibbutz to find shelter. They just bomb shelters that you can run inside. You cannot close them.
The bomb shelter is what we know to keep us safe.
Yeah.
And they just killed them in there. They had no chance.
On their way to safety, Omer and Gali saw the damage to their own home through the baby monitor, which was still on. Kibbutz Raemer and other communities in the area were decimated. But thanks to you, CBN was able to help get people to safety quickly and provide them with shelter, food, and other essentials.
So we evacuated with the kibbutz, which has been hard and healing in some sort of way to speak with everyone, to hear what they went through, the ones that had to stay in that nightmare. And all we can do is take it day by day. And
With your support, these Israelis are able to stay in a hotel far from the line of fire so they can look ahead with hope at rebuilding their lives.
it's showing a light at the end of the tunnel, that people support us, people hear us, people feel us. They are mourning with us, and they're going to help us build back our homes from the ashes.
And that's exactly what you're doing if you're a member of the 700 Club. That's you in action, helping people who were forced to evacuate from the Gaza envelope. And now, how do we rebuild? How do we reestablish it? That Gaza envelope is responsible for 60% of the produce produced in the nation of Israel. It's vital, and we've got to see what we can do to help those who want to return and want to rebuild. If that's you, if you want to be a part of this effort, all you have to do is give to CBN Israel. It's one of our designated funds where it goes into the news bureau there. It goes into creating documentaries on Israel. And right now it's going to help the evacuees. And in the months to come, it will go to help those who are trying to rebuild in the Gaza envelope. If you want to be a part of it, call us and say, yes, I want to give. 1-800-700-7000. You can also write to us at CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia. Just put CBN Israel in the memo line of a check. You can text CBN Israel to 71777, or you can go to cbn.com. On the giving page, there's a place where you can designate. Let's do our part. Let's help those in need. 1-800-700-7000.
Welcome to Washington for the CBN News Break. Disappointing numbers on the economy today, as the first estimate of economic growth in the first 3 months of this year came in at just 1.6%, far below expectations, and another sign the economy is slowing down. Analysts expect the economy to remain weak for the rest of the year. Well, Donald Trump's legal team is back before the Supreme Court today. The case centers on whether the former president can face trial on charges that he tried to subvert the 2020 election. Trump contends that presidents are immune to prosecution post-presidencies for actions taken while in office. The justice's decision will be a major ruling on the scope of presidential power. The timing of the decision is also important, as it could push a potential trial to after the November election. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.
Mobilize, activate, deploy. Gene Bailey is calling on Christians to rise up. He says our world is at a flashpoint, and believers need to take their place in God's army in this critical hour.
Since Flashpoints start on the Victory Channel in 2020, Gene Bailey has been the host and executive producer of the program. Gene discusses current events and important issues with a wide variety of guests, politicians, and other newsmakers. Believing we're in the third Great Awakening, Gene says it's time for believers to transform the world around us.
Gene Bailey is with us now. We welcome you to the 700 Club.
Thank you. Great to be here.
The book is called Flashpoint of Revival. Define a flashpoint and why you named it that.
Yeah, that's great. You know, a flashpoint is really that moment in time when something explodes and goes a different direction. It's a chemical reaction, but there's also a definition that says it's a political flashpoint is when something explodes and goes a different direction or changes the ultimate direction of where you're going in a political culture. And
So,
that's really what it is.
Talk about flashpoints in our culture today. Name some of those.
Well, I think what your guess with Adele, I mean, the world has not been the same since October 7th. And even, recently with what we're seeing with our election, we're in a flashpoint right there. The world has never seen a U.S. presidential candidate seen in court trying to defend himself in a case that shouldn't even be there.
Yes.
So these are all things that never have happened before, but take us in a new direction. And this is why we have to stand up and be who we are as believers.
So talk about that, if you will. What is our role as believers in the midst of this? How do we push back against what we see happening that we know is a flashpoint?
Well, yeah, thanks, Terry. Really, it's very simple. As believers, God has called us. We know He's called us to the 7 mountains to go take dominion, and that's become a bad word, but it's not, because as believers, we are already in business. I think about 700 Club, media, and CBN's the media. People need to take their role. If you're a pastor, you need to pastor people. If you're a leader or businessman, be the leader and businessman in your community, but do it with the understanding of who you are as a believer needs to drive us. And I think if we can do that, if you're a school teacher, teach, but don't indoctrinate. There's a difference.
And don't be silent.
Don't be silent.
I mean, listening to Adele,
that's right.
Doesn't that spur you on?
Yeah, you better believe it.
Speak up. You talk about skinny jeans Christians. And we've been enjoying the blessings of God, the pleasure of peace and all that He has blessed us with. What's happened to us within the culture?
Well, I believe we, it's in the book is skinny jeans and big screens and fog machines. Is what, I got that from our friend Mario Murillo, and what that means is the church stopped being effective when we started trying to be entertainment, and I'm not saying we can't have all those things. I like all those things, maybe not the skinny jean part, but we must understand our role. As the church, we have the answer the world is looking for. If we look like the world, why would they come to us? So we have to be different, and we have to understand. We cannot let entertainment be the driving force to get people saved, to get their lives changed. I like what Reinhard Bonnke used to say. He said, if you have to serve tea and coffee, then you always have to serve tea and coffee and biscuits, and that's not what we're supposed to be.
Right.
We're not supposed to be that.
Well, talk about the fact that we're in the world, but we're not to be of the world. How do we do that in an effective way so that we're not seen as impossible to understand or communicate with?
Well, dearie, we have to know, number one, who we are as believers, your identity in Christ, and understanding this is who I am. And I believe that's where most of us detour, because we don't feel confident in who we are. We're insecure in our environment, or maybe we didn't grow up with the right group of people or in the right house, and maybe we come from a divided home. Whatever, we have to understand in Christ we are a new creature. And if we are a new creature, then we're new. So we need to step forward and be who we are. And that's sometimes as simple as standing up at their school board meeting and saying, I don't want you teaching my children with these books in our library.
One of the things, Gene, that seems so a part of our culture, whether it's Christians or just politicians, whoever, we don't want to offend anyone.
That's right.
We have a fear in us, really, of being seen as too radical or impossible to communicate with. How do we deal with that?
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because as believers, we have been, when I growing up, you were supposed to be, don't get in a fight, don't do anything, be peace at all costs. Don't rock the boat. And I think that was a demonic strategy. Sounded religious, but it was wrong.
Yes.
We're supposed to stand up. You don't see any weak-minded, weak-willed Christians in the Scripture. You don't see any of that in the Scripture. I mean, these are guys, men were men, and they were taking their place, and they were going to jail for what they believed, and even to the place of what they cost. But it's not just in Scripture; it's in our own American history books.
Yes.
This is something that we must not lose, is our American history. The founding fathers, these men gave their lives, fames, and fortunes for what they believed in: freedom and family and faith in America.
You know, I hear so many people discouraged.
Right.
And even lamenting the hour that we live in, but we're strategically positioned by God in the place that we're in. How do we think generationally in the middle of that?
Well, you know, I'm glad you said it, because this is the best time to be alive. Sounds crazy with what we're living in. But for some reason, God had you and me alive at this time in history when America's going through what America's going through.
Yes.
So that we can be the salt. We can be the savor of the world that says, no, Jesus is the way, and this is why we need to stand up. And if we do that, and we understand our role, we understand we don't have to have all the answers. I know as humans, as Christians, we often think, well, I have to understand who's a good guy, who's a bad guy. We think there's the white hat or the black hat, who's the right one to stand behind. And we're understanding a lot of things that we thought were true in our own government. It just isn't true anymore.
But we do know what truth is.
Yes, we do.
And we can speak it, we can
Amen.
pray it, we
That's
can
right.
declare it, we can stand firm. Jean's book is called Flashpoint of Revival. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for being with us today. It's a message for the hour that we live in.
Thank you.
So we have time for some of your email questions. And Gordon, this first one comes from Faye, who says, why isn't the media calling for the surrender of Hamas, the aggressor in this conflict?
Well, Faye, I'm in the media. I'm calling for it. And I think that's exactly where the pressure needs to be placed. But you look at how the media is structured, and here's some things that you may not know. Number one, in order to be a reporter for within the Palestinian Authority, so you're going to have freedom to interview people and take pictures and file reports. If you ever criticize them, you are kicked out. You will lose your credentials. I don't think that's ever been reported, but that's the fact. If you're one of the reporters in Gaza, you absolutely were favorable to Hamas, and I find that incredible. So when you hear things like the AP gave the News Picture of the Year award to a picture of a decapitated woman in the back of a pickup truck, the photographer who made that picture was part of the problem. I find it astounding that the AP wouldn't know what they were doing and how they were rewarding terrorism. When you see an Al Jazeera reporter, producer, cameraman being hugged by Yahya Sinwar, that tells you what side he's on. That tells you his point of view. But we're not seeing that. When the Gaza Ministry of Health, isn't that a wonderful name? And we're going to report that an Israel attacked the hospital. The reality was it was one of their own rockets that went off in the parking lot, but it went around the world. The New York Times bought into that lie. And even the current stats that there are 32,000 innocent Gazan civilians who have been killed by Israel, and that stat gets repeated as somehow it's true. It's coming from the same source. It's coming from the Gaza Ministry of Health. It's a propaganda arm of Hamas. Why would anyone believe it? The pressure should always be solely and exclusively on a terror group identified by our own government as a terror group that's currently running Gaza. They should unconditionally surrender, release all the hostages, and I'll remind you, American hostages are in there too. Let's release all of them, surrender, lay down your arms, and stop this nonsense. That's where I think I'm preaching now. I got to stop.
It's okay. It was a good message. It was a good message. This is Anna Gordon, who says, I was in a Bible study where they used the reference BCE, before Common Era. I complained that they were taking Christ out of the equation, but the teacher said we need to accept these changes and that we don't want to offend non-Christians. I feel in my spirit she's wrong, but am I overreacting?
And I'm getting fired up again. You've got to be kidding me. You're in a Bible study.
Really?
And you're worried about offending non-Christians? What? Jesus Christ divided time. Martin Luther King, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was so emphatic on this one point. Jesus divided time. Before he came, before his sacrifice, we all lived in darkness. We had to somehow perform. We had to sacrifice on our own. We had to do a whole bunch of good things, and we were trying to perfect ourselves and everything. How can we be good enough for God to pay attention to us? But Jesus came, and he divided time. And before he came, we were in darkness. After he came, we are in his marvelous light, where he comes to us. We have his righteousness. He gives us righteousness, peace, and joy. Christians should always celebrate that and always insist the reason time divided is because a Savior came. We leave you with these words from Deuteronomy. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. God bless. We'll see you again tomorrow.